So here's how we're going to do this video. First, I'm going to create a hook, something to keep you interested. And then I'm going to do a 10-second montage of clips with the Yacht-Master 1. Somewhere in the video, I'm going to plug my straps, the standard time NATO straps. We're going to go over the first impressions and how the watch feels in the hand. Then we're going to get into this juicy title of why it's the next hype watch. A big thanks to Ken Watches. They're a watch store in Hong Kong, and thanks to them, I've got hands-on with this Yacht-Master 1 and a lot of the watches you see in recent videos. So do check them out at kenwatches.com. So the Yacht-Master 1. It's like a submariner wearing a fancy dress, but it's not exactly that, because underneath that dress, it lacks the muscle and definition that the submariner has. So with that sandblasted Rhodium bezel and that pop of blue with the seconds hand, it's really fancy. Now, Rhodium, as Rolex would tell you, is 95% platinum and 5% magic. So this watch is the reference 116622, and the current one is the 126622. And the only aesthetic difference between the new one and this one is that coronet between Swiss and made on the dial. So hardly any difference, apart from the movement upgrades, of course. Now the specifications: 40 millimeters in diameter. So like a submariner, like the previous submariner. It's 48 millimeters from lug to lug. So very close to the submariner. It's basically nearly the same, but it's 11.5 millimeters thick, whereas the submariner is over 13. So there's a smidge difference in the thickness, and that comes at the expense of the water resistance. So the Yacht-Master has 100 meters, whereas the submariner has 300 meters. Hence the muscle and lacking in definition thing. So is this a sports model? Yes, of course it's a sports model. But is it a sports watch? No, I don't think it's a sports watch. It's too fancy. It's dressy with the polished center links and the platinum on the bezel. That's typically not something you expect in a sports watch. And it's really not a sports watch. It's just got the clothing of the submariner to some extent. But apart from that, it's quite different. In the hand, the watch is very reflective and hard to miss. Like I said, the polished center links do most of that job for it. Also, the contrast between the sandblasted Rhodium bezel and the raised polished numerals on the bezel adds to this effect as well. The watch simply effortlessly manages to capture your attention. Overall, it's a bit more dressy than you'd expect, but that actually doesn't detract from the sporty experience. So this is not a sports watch, but it gives you that sporty experience and aesthetic. I think this watch can be worn with any level of fancy, but the thing is, it will never be versatile because it simply can't go under the radar. Being of compact dimensions, if there's one thing that Rolex always nails in all their watches, it's the weight and the tactility. It feels great in the hand. It feels exactly what you'd want it to feel. A lot of watches, when you go and try them out, it actually feels a bit different to what you imagined the experience would be. But with most Rolex watches, and with this one, you really feel how you're expecting to feel. I always enjoy a bit of compact heft with my watches, and that's kind of why I'm not a big fan of titanium on the Grand Seiko Snowflake, and you can check that video out here. Okay, the impression's done. Now let's get to the juicy bit, the reason you're all here, the question. Why is the Rolex Yacht-Master becoming the next hype Rolex? Now you've probably already seen this watch recently on YouTube, thanks to Oshin and Jenni Elle's videos on it. Now that's kind of the reason why. Now Oshin and Jenni are large, fantastic, amazing creators on YouTube with really purposeful and useful content. But there's more to it. These large, amazing creators actually have the ability to inspire interest in a particular model. Now, I'm not saying that they're purposely inspiring interest in any particular watch ever, but it's just that when it comes to Rolex, there's a lot of interest. So this is kind of a halo brand when it comes to watches in general. It's the #1 watch brand that everyone knows about, so it's the most likely to be talked about on YouTube, and it does the best on YouTube as well. So everybody's simply looking for more content on Rolex. But Rolex only has a certain number of watches. They have a similar lineup that they've had for decades. They don't go producing very new watches every single year with new lines. They simply revise some of their existing models. So everyone's basically well acquainted with the existing lineup. So there's only so much to talk about certain hype models. Now, sports models are always in the news. So everyone's always interested in sports models, regardless of which model it is. It's the sort of cyclical hype that revolves around each sport model. So one year it's a Submariner. Let's say 2020, it was the Rolex Submariner. That was the entire hype. Whereas this year, 2021, so far it's been the Rolex Daytona. Whether it's the white gold one, whether it's the yellow gold one, green dial, or simply this sports model, the most hyped ones. But now, I think slowly the Yacht-Master is beginning to take over. So it's becoming the next Rolex hype model because of all this existing interest in Rolex and only so few models being available. So it's a cyclical process, and eventually every single sports model will get some level of high interest and recognition. How long do you expect any one lineup or one product to hold people's attention? Now, you can expect a brand like Rolex. It's one of the few brands that actually manages to keep people's attention for the longest periods of time. It's kind of like Apple. But within Rolex, there's only so much you can talk about specific models, and there's only so much interest in a certain model. And after a while, whether the hype and the prices subside or change or not, people's interests do differ. Every year there's something new, something more interesting, something to look at that's been left unturned for a while. This time, I think the Yacht-Master is that watch. So nobody is suddenly intrigued by the Yacht-Master because it was some sort of hidden gem or any specific reason. It's just that there's cyclical hype when it comes to Rolex, and people get bored easily. So people do want to look at the next thing. And when you can't get most of the sports models, you look at the ones you can get with a greater chance. Right now, it's the Yacht-Master for that. In fact, it could have been any random Rolex that just shared some minor traits. So it's basically an overflow of interest into a similar field. So that's pretty much it, guys. That's why the Rolex Yacht-Master is probably becoming the next hype Rolex. Thanks for watching. See you guys in the next video. Cheers.